Welcome. So delighted to welcome you today. So my name is Jamila, and I'm your Zoom host for this one-day summit. It's Breathwork and Movement Therapy for Trauma Healing Summit. And with us today, we have the amazing Manuela Mishka-Reeds. And this session will be entitled From Freeze to Flow, Somatic Pathways Through Trauma Using Movement. And as we gather today, we love to acknowledge that the land that we live and work on is the traditional territory of many indigenous peoples, and we respectfully honor the cultures and traditions. All right, and with that, let me go ahead and introduce our very honored guest for this session, Manuela Mishka-Reeds, MFT, and who is an international teacher of somatic psychology, somatic psychotherapist, and founder of Hakomi Institute of California and Embodywise nonprofit that cultivates learning from the wisdom teachings of the body. She is the developer of the innate somatic intelligence trauma therapy approach, ISITTA, and the in-depth trauma training program for therapists and practitioners. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to you, Manuela. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Jamila. Thanks, Oyami. Hello, everyone. I'm gonna look for the gallery view so I can see your faces. So I'm usually calling in from California where I live and practice, but I'm actually in Italy right now. That's my very colorful wallpaper in the back, which are artichokes. So I'm a very different place here right now. But it's really good to see you all. And I'm delighted to give my presentation to you, which I call From Freeze to Flow, Somatic Pathways Through Trauma Using Movement. And I recently wrote a book, actually just got released, called Trauma Sensitive Movement, which is a workbook for both therapists and for the client and the therapist to work with movement in trauma. So if you're interested in that, it's not a plug for my book, but a lot what I'm going to be talking about is actually based on that book. So in case you're interested. What I have in mind here for our time together is actually not show you a PowerPoint. Usually I do a PowerPoint, and you probably will get some here as well, but I thought that we could do a series of talking about this topic and then giving you some experiential kind of flavors for it, and then having some Q&A, and then talking a little bit more about it. So giving a layered cake of working with movement with trauma in a more experiential way. It's so kind of strange to be teaching a movement and not to be moving. You know, talking about movement is kind of the opposite of what this is actually about. So you listen to your body. If I'm asking you to move, then please listen to whatever you're able to do, whatever you want to do. Always your primary teacher is your body, and that's what you listen to. My invitations are just that, they're invitations to move, but you gauge what's right for you. What I do ask now is the gift of your attention. So for the time, if you may give me the gift of your full attention, I would really appreciate it, because it does make a difference. I know Zoom has this high distractibility factor to it, but when we're working with somatic work, when we're working with movement, and I'm going to introduce to you the subtlety of movements, attention is a really important factor in this. So when we're multitasking and doing 5 things at the same time while we're listening to this kind of presentation, you're probably not going to get what I have to offer you fully. So, and you're going to help me stay on task as well. So thank you. Gift of the attention is something very precious at this time right now, when we're all struggling with staying attentive and tending to our attention. And right there, we're in the thick of the trauma topic, actually. So what I'm going to be talking to you is a little bit of, I'll give you a frame around trauma. And then I cherry picked working with freeze, from freeze to flow, which is one response of trauma. So I chose this one. And in the course, you know, we go through all of the different trauma responses and much more in depth. But I chose the freeze in particular because it's the most tricky one to work with. So I thought I'll frame it for you. We'll get a little bit of a feel of how to work with it. And then I'm sure you have lots of questions. And this is actually where I'd like to be teaching from, is your interest in your question of what's passionate to you. So when we are talking about trauma from a somatic perspective, we are talking about both our psychobiology and the meaning that we have created about trauma. When we have a true trauma experience, and trauma, in my view, is on a continuum from stressor, that's actually a stress that's actually very helpful. We do need stress in our lives. We need so-called positive stress. Otherwise, we don't get motivated. We actually don't do anything. So stress necessarily is not bad. If we have the adequate time to process the stress and can, my favorite word, metabolize those stressors, stress actually provides an opportunity for growth and grit. There's tons of studies based on this, right? So when we have a stressor, we also grow. And I would also say when we have trauma, it's also an opportunity for growth. But that's not where we start. And certainly not in trauma therapy. That's not where we start. So then it's a continuum, right? So here we have stress, and on the other hand, we have overwhelming trauma, and then we have everything in between. So there is no such thing as a static, like this is trauma. Trauma is multiple things. Trauma is the individual experience. It's how our nervous system has responded to the event. And then it's also the kind of meaning that we have created around it. So you and I could be in the same event, but we might walk away with some very different takeaways and experience. For you, it might be thrilling, and you go like, wow, that really challenged me. And I became a much more resilient human out of this experience. And I might be collapsing over here, going like, this was the most traumatic thing in my life, and I might be depressed or anxious for the next 5 years. So we have to keep in mind that trauma, we use that word a lot right now. We're kind of in a trauma-informed age, but we're also in an age where we're not very careful of how we use that word. Not everything is trauma. There is, so, as I said, there is stress and there's discomfort, and stress and discomfort is necessary. Trauma is not necessary, although it's a fact of life, and we do encounter it, unfortunately. And we are either have trauma ourselves, or we know many people that have been affected by trauma. So as I said, trauma is a biological, a psychobiological response. And the classic response is either a fleeing response, a fighting response, or a freeze response. And there's a fourth one that we often talk about, which I'm not going to do too much in this talk here, but it's the appease response, where we're relationally appeasing whoever we're being traumatized by, especially relationally. But the classic trauma responses, or psychobiologically speaking, is when we experience a true threat to our nervous system, to us. We often want to remove ourselves by fleeing, by going away, by withdrawing, or we might go on the offensive by physically attacking or verbally attacking or being aggressive, or we might freeze. And those responses are human responses, they're mammalian responses, and they're incredibly helpful when we are under true duress. When we have adequate safety, when we have adequate space, when the body perceives that it's okay to release the fight, flight, and freeze responses that come pretty quickly in our nervous system when there's true threat, our body goes through what's called a discharge process. And it's actually movement. It's a involuntary, often shaking or crying or tremoring, or an intense sense of vulnerability. They're often a discharging kind of movements that happen in our nervous system. And it's the attempt of our nervous system that has had to be under such focus to run away, or such focus to attack, or such focus to freeze, to release those responses of the nervous system, to recalibrate and to metabolize whatever those stresses are. There's a lot of biochemistry that goes into it. And so that's a natural way in which our body tries to recalibrate and metabolize that threat response that we just were under. So note that that is movement. Yeah? When we're trying to move away from a stressor, we're literally physically moving away. That's movement. We often don't see it through movement eyes. When we're charging at somebody, when we have to defend ourselves with pushing or kicking, for example, that is movement. They're called defensive movements. Yeah? If you're pushing, if you're flicking, if you're kicking, those are the repertoire of our human body in order to ensure our survival. Freezing is also a movement, I would say. It's the absence of movement, but it's still a movement. Because what happens is that we're stilling our body when going into freeze to the degree that we become undetectable. And biologically, evolutionary speaking, when we're undetectable, whatever the threat is, especially relational, if there's a predator coming after us, if we don't move, we have a good chance for survival. This is baked in our evolution because, for example, dogs, or when they're attacking something and it's, quote, dead, it's frozen, they need the struggle of the prey in order to trigger a biting response and a salivating response. And so in the human predator realm, same thing. If we're struggling, it actually fires up a sympathetic charge, and there's more engagement and more wanting to overpower the person that's struggling. If you are submitting, if you're freezing, you're not giving that kind of resistance, there's a high chance that the predator will let go and lose interest. Yeah? So it's a very incredible evolutionary survival strategy that freezing is very smart in terms of surviving. And then when we have, as I said, that adequate safety and space, and when the predator has left and there's no more threat, then we go through those discharge movements of shaking, crying, releasing, and metabolizing all those biochemistry that had to mobilize sympathetic charge to mobilize the fight or flee or freeze. And in the terms of freezing, what happens is usually most people have a threat, want to withdraw, want to flee, or want to fight. And that's not possible. Maybe the person is right there. We're socially in a situation where it would not be suitable if we're running away or fighting. So freezing often in a social situation becomes the option that we often go into. But what that means on a nervous system level is that we had the impulse to run away, we had the impulse to fight, but it had to be stopped or truncated. And then the freeze response took precedent, which means it cut off the impulse to run, the impulse to fight, and we're now stilling movement in a very dramatic way. So the innateness of movement that wants to happen to bring myself to safety is now being interrupted. And now the other movement comes, which is freezing and stilling and withholding and basically turning into no movement. Yeah. On the outside. On the inside, it's a different story. And most people who had, and I'm sure, who of you ever had a threat experience and then you went into a freeze? How many of you had that experience? Yeah, you all know that. And how many of you had inside, like you felt like inside you were very awake, very aware what's going on, but outside you were very, yeah, right? So there's like this dual awareness of you're still on the outside, right? There's not a movement that you're making, but on the inside, you are tracking everything, right? You're hearing a pin drop, you're hearing the grass grow, you're an incredible attunement with what's happening, right? So again, these are movements of our nervous system, and they're kind of in that moment, between this outer stillness and the inner alertness, right? It's happening at the same time. When the threat is over, when there's enough safety, the body recalibrates. But what happens is that often there is not enough safety. Perhaps the person lives in an abusive situation. Perhaps the person lives in an ongoing war zone, or a constant threat in somewhere, a perceived threat, or it's not socially acceptable. Whatever the conditions are, the perception is it's not safe, and I cannot release those responses in my body. So I might release a little bit, or I basically create freeze as the new baseline to respond. And so then we're talking about a chronicity of trauma. Right? So this is what we see with people who have CPTSD and PTSD, that they often get stuck in that freeze response because it's become their new baseline of responding because the environment is not safe. And so that immobility turns often into dissociation. Right? So I'm freezing, it becomes now my baseline. I continuously dissociate. The slightest little trigger, the slightest little something towards me is perceived as a threat. I go back into a freeze response and dissociate as a coping mechanism. And so it becomes a way of being, a way of living. You know? And when I have worked with clients, and so many times when I said, this is your trauma response. This is not who you are. You are not your trauma. And it feels like a light bulb to the client. Because they go like, well, but that's who I think I am. Right? Who am I without this? But they've been so habituated to that response. So when we're working, I'm giving you all this background because when we're working with movement, when we're actually bringing voluntary movement, so our client is perhaps working with a lot of those freezing states, they feel socially awkward, they go into a new environment, they feel like they can't really speak up much because they feel threatened, they feel very shy. Yeah, and it's not just like they feel shy, normal shy, they feel shy to the, social anxiety or really clamp down and they feel like they start to sweat or they can't perform properly or whatever it is, right? So they're living in that kind of trauma vortex of continuously freezing and becoming immobile in these social situations. And when you then wanted to bring movement as a healing modality, it can feel very threatening because the body says, wait a minute, I need to freeze and you're telling me to move. That just doesn't compute because movement means I'm going to be visible and visibility means I'm going to perhaps die, right? Or I'll be perpetrated or I'll be hurt, whatever the version is, right? So there is kind of right there when you're dealing with somebody who is in a freeze response and you're telling them to move, right there, they're going to go like, this is a dissonance. Even that suggestion is too much, right? So having that trauma-informed lens is very important because when we're talking about bringing movement to a body that's habitually frozen or struggles with frozen responses, we need to be incredibly sensitive to how we even verbalize movement, how we invite a client into movement, and then how we facilitate them through it. So some principles in working with somatic movement, like as a container to think about, is to go very slow. So here's some key principles. Go really, really slow, like really slow. And like really, really slow. Because anything that's fast, think about somebody who's frozen, or maybe you have your own wrist frozen, right? Inside, you're super vigilant. And now I'm saying to you, how about we do this movement together? And me even modeling this and having some energy with it is like alert, 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 right? The person will go, hell no, I'm not going to move. So the introduction, how I'm even verbalizing what the invitation is, what I'm asking the client to do needs to be done with such sensitivity and slowness because the vigilance is already up. The person that's frozen is very, very awake inside often. And that's, by the way, a gift. There's always a gift to trauma. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I love working with trauma clients so much is because they're often so astute, so tuned in, so awake because they had to, right? That's part of the byproduct. And if you can turn it actually with working somatically, if you can turn it into a real asset for the client. So another principle, slow, safety. But safety for the client on their terms, not what I think is safe, what they think is safe. So the safety perception is very off usually, or very different what my safety perception is and what the client's is. So the slightest noise or the slightest movement or a change in your office, for example, can really rattle a client that lives in a freeze continuum. So safety, what's safe for them? So we need to find out. So safety, going slow, bringing an awareness to the client, which I call inner tracking, because they're already tracking very carefully, and asking them to track and bring awareness of tracking with them. And then really giving them a lot of agency, meaning, what would you like to do right now? Does this movement feel good to you or that movement feel good to you? Is it A or is it B? I'm not going to say, for example, what kind of movement feels good to you? That's too big. But would this kind of movement feel good if we do a small hand movement like that or this way? So I'm giving them two options. And the reason is that the client has a choice. And the most important part is that they have a choice and that they choose. Why? Because trauma takes away self-agency. That's inherent in most trauma responses. Yeah? So when you're giving the client like, which one would you like to do, A or B? And it doesn't really matter what it is to me, right? It signals you're in charge and I'm going to ally with you. So whatever movement we're doing it on your terms. We're doing it slowly. We're doing it at your pace, and we're doing exactly the choice that you want to do. Can you already feel how respectful that is to the organism of the person? Right? So this is really important. And we're bite-sizing movement. So another principle is bite-sizing and making it doable. Yeah. So if I say to a client, would this movement feel good if we move the hand? And they go, oh, I don't think so. So how about moving your fingers like that? Yeah, I could do that. Or how about moving your toes and your feet in your shoes so I can't see it? And the client goes, oh, yeah, that feels good. Right? So often with a freeze response, you want to be offering movements that are so small, so invisible, perhaps so intrinsic and so doable that there's no bar to be crossing here. It's not a stress. And that's important. So I'm going to start with something that's so easy, so doable, and so hidden even, especially if there's shame coupled into it, that the person can do it. Even the most compromised body can also do it. That's really important. Because there's a very basic principle at work when you're working with movement. We are human beings. As human beings, we move. We are movement. We move all the time. We have intrinsic movements. Breath is movement. Our body walks, moves around the space. Even if you're living in a compromised or pained body, you are movement. Your cells in the body are pulsing. There's intrinsic movement that is already happening. So we don't even have to do movement. We have to recognize that we are movement. And often when I work with freeze response, clients are very relieved when I say, you know what, you already are moving. Because most clients have this feeling when I say, would you like to work with movement? They go, I'm just asking them now to do like big leaps through the room like a ballerina, like dance, right? But it's very different. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the moving body. And we're talking about reestablishing a movement because frozenness and mobility has interrupted something that was natural that wanted to happen. That's what we're talking about. So movement is used to reconnect people with an innate impulse to get themselves out of that immobility response that makes them feel so dampened down. So those principles are really important that I was just mentioning because they provide a container in which we kind of offer whatever movement I'm going to be offering. They provide a kind of safety for what we're doing. So when we're, let's start with a very simple, let me do one simple one first. And this is called orienting, which is often used in somatic experiencing, but it's one of the innate movements that we're actually born with. So if I ask you to just look around your space that you're in, just a simple instruction, go ahead and look around your room. How about the outside? Yeah. And as you do that, notice how you're doing it. Are you doing it fast? Are you doing it slow? What movements are being engaged in your body as you are looking around? What parts of the body do you engage? Now bring to the looking around and orienting, where you're orienting yourself to the space, like really pay attention to what's in your space. Details, colors, shape. And if you can, slow it down even more. Really slow it down. Like wander around with your eyes, take in the details. And again, notice and how you're doing it. Notice how your breath shifts as you do it. Is there more volume coming in? Are you slowing down? Is your curiosity engaged? And now add to the orienting preference. Orient around the space and look for what pleases you, what gives you joy as you're looking at an object, a color, shape, maybe your favorite painting. Or you might even go like, wow, I don't like this particular thing over there. So look for what you like and you don't like. Very simple. And if there was something that you like, just dwell there for a moment, take that in, and just enjoy the beauty or the pleasure of the color or the shape or the artwork that reminds you of something. Or that cool, whatever you got there in the space. And if you have like, oh, I don't like that, then just notice how you have an aversion towards it, how that feels. And give it one more moment. Again, look around, orient, reference. And you might even notice that there's that kind of spot behind you where it's hard to turn. You might want to even include that because you haven't looked behind you. And notice as you do that, how you have to organize your body and movement to do that. It all goes into including in your body movement in order to really make sure that behind you is covered. And then when you feel like, oh, behind me is good, it's safe, you really got that, and come back to the center and then cast your eyes down and notice your body. Any kind of shift or awareness. Okay, thank you. So let's hear it. That's what's in there. You can put it in the chat or you can even raise a hand if somebody wants to say something. But what are some of the awarenesses that you had? What did you notice? And in particular, I'm interested in the shift that happened and I'm interested in the movement that you discovered. A settling feeling. Nice. Yawning. Yes. Uh-huh. Digestion got loud. Yes. Uh-huh. Good. Oh, the yawning response. It's good. Slowing down. Took a deep breath right away. Uh-huh. You felt comforted by the beauty, settling. Breathing slowed down. Yeah, it's interesting when you have aversion, how you get charged up. Yes. Tired. Grounding and centering. More aware. Peaceful. Relaxed. Recentered. You didn't like the word joy. Okay. Calming, tingling, more relaxed. Yeah, a whole range here. Good, 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 good. So that's beautiful that some of you felt that breath right away. So what you just did, hyperfixation of things, yeah, that happens to me too. It's like, what? Why did I put that there? I need to move that. Suddenly you see the dust in your room. Yes, the inner critic, right? One way to do that is to move to something that gives you pleasure. So what you did, it's beautiful that some of you experienced more breath capacity and the shift of the breath right away. So what you did is you used the orienting response that's innate in a conscious way. And it's one of those primal movements. So I often talk about these primordial or primal movements before we even go into any kind of voluntary movement that's expressive or in any way. So I'm very interested in the more organic and primordial movements of the human body when we're working with trauma. So the move when you're turning your head and you're doing the orienting movement, believe it or not, but that movement is already present in utero. a developing fetus does that movement of orienting to sound and stimuli in utero. And there's this beautiful footage. You can Google it on YouTube. When a newborn is born, when a baby's born, and it's an unmitigated, no medical intervention, no traumatic birth in any way, just a normal stressful birth. The baby will turn its head to the familiar voices for the parents, for example. It will turn and do the orienting. And so this movement of orienting towards sound, towards stimuli, is a very innate human movement. It's also how we keep ourselves safe. So when we hear a sound that's unfamiliar, we orient towards it because we want to identify it. And so what Stephen Porges has found out is that when we're doing that movement of orienting, it begins to stimulate the inner ear, and it begins to stimulate the polyvagal nerve. It's this motion of turning the head towards safety or towards the stimuli sends signals through our entire nervous system to central nervous system, which branches to every organ, and either says, mobilize, we need to run, or everything is fine, this is so beautiful. And then we have that, how beautiful, right? Then we go into the parasympathetic relaxed response. So that movement of orienting already signals other cascades movements through the body, and either mobilizes our body towards action or introduces the kind of it's okay, there's no danger. So when we're using orienting, it's already a movement that's so, quote, pedestrian. We do it all the time. But when we bring awareness to it, we actually begin to orient consciously, and we can trigger a positive response of, like I just arrived here yesterday in Italy. I'm in a new town. I've never been here, right? So I just took a walk earlier, and I'm walking through this new neighborhood, and I was very aware of my orienting response because everything is unfamiliar, right? People are talking beautiful Italian, and there's sounds that are unfamiliar to me, and I don't know where I am. And so I'm much more conscious of looking around the environment. And that's often when we travel, we're a little bit fatigued. It's partly because we have to orient all the time, and we have to filter out if something is safe or not, right? So we can use this when we're working with trauma clients. When you have a frozen response, you can simply say to the client, go ahead and let yourself look around my office. And that's how movement begins. Yeah. And then often the client goes, take a breath. I like your office. Or wow, I really don't like your painting over there, right? So clients would go through preferences, and that's totally fine. And when you even bring it in playfully, go like, you know what? Yeah, that vase that was given to me by my whatever, I don't like it either. There can be even a laughter about it, can bond over it, right? Or go like, oh, I love that painting. It reminds me of the ocean, or right. And immediately you're coupling movement, breath, awareness of the space, relationship, all in that in one tiny little movement that's already innate of what we're doing. So it's a very powerful technique to use. And I know some of you said, my neck got stiff, that something is behind me. The one spot we can't see is behind us, right? That's our blind spot. We cannot see literally, right? We don't have eyes going. That's why it's called a blind spot. And so what we do though, is we can sense in the back, right? Have you ever heard that expression of the hair standing up at the back of the neck, right? So we have that, like somebody would approach us, especially somebody with a malintent, we can feel it, right? But we have kind of sensory eyes back there. We are equipped with our skin actually to sense, with our nervous system to sense what's behind us. I certainly felt that today walking through the park. I felt like I had a 360 awareness, right? What's going on around me? And so often what we do is we turn around, we do the orienting, and then we turn our shoulders. And if I really want to see there's a sound behind me, I'm beginning to turn my whole body towards it. What is that movement? Feel it in your own body. There's something behind you. It doesn't even have to be threatening. Let's not go there for a moment. But there's something behind you can't identify. And you want to see it. Now follow the body and notice what kind of movement comes. You have to go all the way back. So notice what happens and what body part twisting, but what body parts get involved. The spine, correct. Lungs, yeah, neck, What about the shoulders? Yes, shoulder. Wait, shoulders, I love it. Hips, yes, crossing the midline. Good. So yes, 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 exactly. It's a spiral. It's a spiral. So think about it. Do it with me. So we're gonna do our eyes. We're gonna look all the way behind. Neck, shoulders, lungs. There's this twist all the way, go all the way back, right? There's this spiraling twist. Now feel that. And then unspiral from the hips. And do it to the other side. Start with the eyes, orient, shoulders, back, hips, and then on. You feel that? It's a spiral. And it feels good to kind of do that spiral and then unspiral. Yes. So again, you have your trauma client that doesn't like to move. You can simply ask them to follow the gaze and then ask them to notice what other parts of the body are getting involved. And that's movement. And what you're getting engaged is now, and some of you said already, yeah, the arms can help. You can have your arms around it, right? You can have your arms to push exactly for leverage. Yes. But all the muscles around the spine, exactly. So what you're bringing in is a whole body awareness. And you're bringing a beautiful spiral. And a spiral is a sequence. And in trauma work, what you're looking for are sequences of movement. Always look for a sequence because trauma interrupts sequence, interrupts flow. So a spiral is a flow. So I like it to just playfully, if you want to stand up, you can do it. I don't have much room here in this hotel room, so I can't demo. But if you want, just play for a moment with a spiral and start it maybe from the top of your head. And you can use the orient to begin with. But I like it to, if you're standing, that's great if you have that room. But I like it to play with the sequencing of the head kind of leading, the face leading, and I'm walking towards a spiral. You can use your hands creatively too, and play with sequencing the body into the little spiral and find a flowing motion with it. And if you want to do it very gently, you can do it as a spiral, just seated. If you want to do it standing, you can use your arms and you describe a spiral. You use your discretion. And then you're spiraling one way, and then you're spiraling the other way. Take your time, really following. And what I like you to notice is how the body sequences through that movement. So take with you the lungs, the belly, the pelvis, how the feet begin to turn. And then use your breath in response to it. Find the spirals. Find the pleasure in the spiraling movement. Looks like Qigong, somebody says. Beautiful. Follow the movement. And you can even spiral all the way around and have the play. Find the play in the spiraling movement. Some of you are doing these beautiful arm movements. Yes. Find all kinds of spirals that interest you. Spiral, spiral, and find the flow in that movement. I can exhale with it. Notice how the lungs begin to open as you do that. Our breath comes in. Find the play and find the pleasure in that movement. Notice what happens to the side of your body. Some of you, that's great. Some of you are really going for it. Go for it for a couple more minutes. Those of you who are not wanting to do it, or very slowly, just do a hand movement, do a spiraling hand movement. So whatever your body allows, play with the spiral in your fingers. And some of you are really going for big movements. I love it. Go for it. And some of you are doing very gentle hand movements, arm movements. Find the spiral that's available. And as you do that, close your eyes for a moment and really find the flow in the movement of the spiral. Find the pleasure of it, however small, however big. If you're doing large movements, really use your breath and sound, perhaps a ah. And you can slow it down or speed it up, whatever's your comfort level. Some of you are very accustomed to move and you can really go for it. And some of you who are new to this, just find a really slow spiral in your hands and your fingertips. So you listen to what's right. And the more you slow it down, the more you can feel the sequence. Feel the sequence of how the movement begins to create a pathway in the body. Feel that pathway. What opens up inside? Feeling the pathway. For more moments. And then slowing it down, making that spiral even smaller, even smaller. Even smaller. And if shaking is happening, let that happen. That's a discharge movement. Let it happen. Nothing to be afraid of. We're mostly interested in feeling the sequence of how the spiral opens up different pathways in the body. And then making the movement so small, perhaps it's just in the fingertips. Yeah, and sometimes they're feeling sadness or grief, letting that wash through. It's exactly what happens. Sometimes we contact surprising places, letting it move. Feeling the pathway. And then bringing your movement to a pause, and then we're gonna just really be with the body. So you can either stand or sit, close your eyes, and just receive your soma. Receive the body as it is, feeling and sensing and noticing the intrinsic movement, the inner movements of the body. You stimulated a very ancient motif, which is a spiral. And now sense into your body and feel what's available. Notice any kind of sensations. And if you're finding any kind of opening, there's like often after a movement like that, there's an opening. It could be an ease or a feeling tone or a place in the body that becomes more available. Or perhaps it shows also, oh, I'm holding over here as a deeper awareness. And then let yourself transition. Open your eyes and do a very gentle orienting, very gentle head turn in your space again, this time just to kind of ground yourself. Look at your familiar space. And then let's come back. hear how that is for you all. How was that? Images of snake coming up, Kundalini. Yeah. Yeah, you want to move more and also sleep. There's lots of yawning again. So yawning, by the way, is a discharge. It means there's often a lot of stressor in the body. And the yawning is a way to metabolize. So let the yawning be there. Yawning is really good. It's a way of recalibrating the nervous system. It's a really good sign. Tears, yes. The body wants to move in new ways. Beautiful. Your body's having an appetite. I want to move in new ways. Yes. Also noticing that there are places that kind of, a little soreness and you want to kind of be there. Absolutely. With movement, sometimes, you get into a twisted spiral and you go, this wants to really stretch and you want to hang out. It's totally fine. Notice a lot of stiffness, but felt energized. Yeah, we often feel that, right? So when we start moving, we're like, creak, crack, crack. So that's fine. And what we bring to it, we keep working with the fluidity. So much of what I teach is about fluidity. So you just kind of play with it. And often we have to work through some stiffness or some, tensions. That's fine. Relax now. Curse, that's fine. We can't hear you. That's good. Um, yeah, beautiful. Felt like having one body rather than lots of parts. And tears flowing. Yes, yes, yes. And you love movement. Yeah, usually we love movement, right? We move as children so much, and then when we get older, we kind of put ourselves into this like chairs and zooms and we choose and clothes that are too tight, tailored, and like get into these straitjackets. But really, what the body wants to do is roll around in the sand like when we were 5 years old, right? So why not? Absolutely. So, and it's literally the antidote to trauma. Movement is moving through it. And that's the beauty of working with movement is we're allowing the natural intelligence, the somatic intelligence of the body to kind of show up and help us. So when we align with movement, we're bringing this deep healing intelligence to the foreground. Felt safety during the spiraling, beautiful. And as we said, you can do a small spiral. You can just work with the hand, right? You can do even a movement like that and kind of work with spiraling and unspiraling. And have you noticed there are no straight lines in nature, right? In architecture, yes, human made, but nature has no straight lines. There is no such thing. Yeah, trees are growing spirally, right? Branches and water is only alive when it actually has eddies and curves and spirals. That's how it charges. That's how water gets its vitality and health. If you put water into human-made canals, straight lines, it actually loses its life. It gets stale. It's brackish, right? So what we're doing just now is we just woke up the waters in our body. We just woke it up. And what that is our cerebral spinal fluids that we're waking up. It's that healing intelligence that we're waking up. And listen, notice how I didn't say, do it this way. I asked you to find the spiral that felt right to you. Remember earlier I said, you need to bring self-agency, choices to the client. I said, make the spiral small or big, play with the pace that feels right to you. So I didn't tell you, do it like this, do it like me, right? None of that. So it's not about a prescription. It's about bringing the client back to a motif that their body already knows because we are nature. You can even use an image. Move, let your body be curving like a tree, or let you follow the wind, how it blows and spirals, right? Like it kind of does little eddies too, or move like a beautiful twisted branch, or however you want to word it. Often nature images like that are very helpful for clients. So what you're doing when you're working with movement and trauma, you're bringing the natural capacity that the client has, the trauma sufferer has gotten stuck in. They don't have access to it. They forgot, right? And they forgot because it's because trauma demanded it, right? They had to be cut off from it. So if I constantly freeze and I'm immobile, I'm beginning to create tension in the body. I'm shortening muscles. I'm becoming dense. And density is very good for holding and for holding on, right? And for surviving, but it's not very good for allowing information through the body. So when we have a repetitive movement, which is attention, tension in the neck, tension in the body, if I'm doing this all the time, I'm creating a lot of density in my fascia, in connective tissue. And when I create density, it doesn't allow for information flow. And when I don't have information flow, I don't have growth. So when we're working with these motifs, or working with spiraling being one of them, and we're working with those basic motifs of human life, what we're doing is we're finding pathways through these dense fascia fibers. We're finding pathways through. And then you find, oh, breath comes up. I feel well-being. I have grief. I have tears. Oh, I can feel the stuckness. I feel anger. Things are beginning to move, right? And now the client is participating in their own organism. Yeah. And that's exactly what you need. Because trauma is often like, oh, I'm responding to, life is dangerous. Oh, that's coming at me, right? So, holding down. And so, yeah, DNA, exactly. Right? A spiral. Basic motif of life. Beautiful. So you got it. So here's a tool to work with, right? And you can literally, the most compromised body. Somebody asked earlier in the Q&A too, if you have a compromised body when you have amputations of some limbs, for example, the trunk can also twist, right? You can have a twist in the trunk. You can have a twist in the spine. That's a spiral. Even I'll tell you about the yawning in a second. Even the tiniest twist in the spine. I've worked with people who had spinal cord injuries, and what in my trauma work, what I bring together is continuum. I'm a continuum teacher, and somatic work, and I'm trained in movement therapies and so on. And in continuum, we work with the smallest little intrinsic movement and these basic motifs. And when you're working with the spine, even the slightest little turn, that's a spiral. It doesn't matter how big it is. Some of you are just beautiful movers over there, taking big, large movements, fabulous. But it doesn't have to be. And in fact, some people never get out of their chair because they're too shy about it. You can just say, do a tiny little twist in your spine, find the movement that feels pleasurable, feel that spiral, think of that beautiful tree that you love in your backyard, and voila, you're bringing resources, movement, and fluidity all into one. And that what engages that process out of the trauma. So yawning is a discharging. Just as crying sometimes is, shaking is, yawning is also discharge. When we're stressed, when we're sitting too many hours on Zoom, have you ever had that? You had a whole day on Zoom and then you go for a walk and you start yawning and yawning and yawning. Have you ever had that? Your body is basically saying, I've been compressed for too long. I've been held to not enough oxygen. And we know when we're doing too much sedentary work, we don't take enough deep breaths. We don't really oxygenate, right? And so then we're literally starving our body. And then when yawning, when you're bringing some kind of physical activity, you start to yawn and it's a discharge and you're actually basically bringing in more oxygen into your system, which is great. And it metabolizes through and it helps it to flush through. Okay. It's a great question. When working with clients, should I hold my own movements back so I don't scare them with my own freedom to move? Yes. You start there. You start with basically being a little underperforming. And especially when you have a lot of access to free movements, if you're very able-bodied, you want to be very conscious that that could be a deterrent to your client. So I start with just, or I say, oh yeah, my shoulder hurt, or, I basically lead with my own compromises, and that's much more relatable. Yeah. Rather than like, oh, look how I can go, right? And then it's very intimidating. And then the client immediately, oh, I can't do that, I can't do it. And as soon as I can, then you're going on a kind of a difficult pathway. So what you want to do is you say, so find the slightest movement, and I might mimic that in my hand, right? And then see, and then say, wow, look at that. You have all that range coming in there. And then when they feel too left alone with their movement, and they feel like I'm observing them like a fish in a bowl, I say, is it okay if I join you, right? Let's do it together. And then I mirror and match their movement. So I never kind of show them a movement because otherwise it's too like, oh, I need to do it like you. I always will match the client's ability and their range. Yeah, that's more the therapeutic application, right? It's different on the dance floor. Then I'll show off. But not when we're working therapeutically, right? Yeah, okay. how does this twist or spiral recalibrate our neurological system and intensity rid of trauma? So what we're doing is we're, as I said, we're kind of inspiring movement. And I'm talking today just about the freeze, right? So when somebody's frozen, you want to find a movement that recalibrates that freeze response. So then what you're bringing with that little twisting movement, you bring a pathway through the body. You're basically showing them a pathway with movement. You're initiating perhaps a discharge, a yawning, a tear, all the stuff that you guys were going through. That's exactly what you want, right? And then the client might go, oh my God, I had this memory back there, and now I'm having this discharge happening in my body. So the spiral also can bring, with any kind of movement really, can also bring forth more trauma memory. And this is why when we're working with movement, it's a very potent tool to work with. You have to be mindful that when you're introducing movement, it also is a gateway into very deep unconscious patterns and also perhaps memory. So a formula that I like to work with is I bring some movement to the client, and then I have them pause, just as I did with you guys. So let's just notice, let's just harvest what's happening. So it's not just moving, but you're moving and then you're letting everything settle, right? It's a kind of resourcing, letting things settle so that the client can catch up with what's actually going on, what's actually happening. Oh, there's a memory surfacing. There's a deeper feeling coming up. So yeah, and what you want to do is you don't want to overwhelm your client. So by doing it, as I said earlier, with those principles, as I said, if you do it slowly, if you're really matching the pace to the client, you're going how they can do it. Usually clients don't get overwhelmed, but let's say they do get overwhelmed. Then you bring resources to it, right? So a preference, I asked you earlier, look around and look for something in the room that you prefer. That's a resourcing technique. So when somebody gets overwhelmed, you can ask them, look around. Oh, I love this painting on my wall. So take that in, that you love that painting. That's a resourcing technique. Or you can use other somatic resourcing technique where you ask them to kind of feel the feet on the ground, now push into the ground. Maybe you need to do something where they have to really push or feel weightedness or grab a pillow. There's a gazillion somatic resourcing techniques that you can do. Or another resourcing might be, why don't we connect for a moment? There was a lot coming up there for you. What's it like for you to take a look at me right now? Well, you feel safe, you have kind eyes, whatever it is, right? So you do want to have the person be in the range where they can be with the experience. It's called the window of tolerance. Overwhelm by itself is not necessarily negative. Sometimes you need to feel overwhelmed to move through it. But if overwhelm turns into dissociation or into fright, then we have a problem. So overwhelm often gets a bad rap because, oh my God, the client gets overwhelmed. But there's nothing wrong with feeling overwhelmed, because you can also feel the spiral and go like, oh, it feels like a lot. It feels like a tsunami moving through my body. And because I know this client and we've worked before, I might go, keep moving, keep moving. And they're actually beginning to take the overwhelm with them. And then suddenly there's maybe a bigger movement, or they get more like self-agency in it. And it's like, oh, now I'm getting mad, right? Now they're not overwhelmed anymore. So we went from, whoa, right, like this into, oh, I've got myself again. So don't underestimate this, that movement itself can bring the client into new stages of mastering the experience. And overwhelm in itself is not necessarily a problem. Okay, just as discomfort isn't. There's often the bad rap that people go, oh my gosh, it's so uncomfortable. Well, we don't grow if we don't have discomfort, right? We have to actually have a kind of a little bit of a sandpaper, right? We have to, the pearl doesn't happen by itself, right? The pearl needs the sand in order to become this beautiful, shiny pearl. So we need to, everything in, think of any experience that we're bringing with movement, that if the client can be with it and can follow it as a sequence, that's what's going to lead to a resolution and to a recalibrating. If it's just chaotic, frightening, shut down, confusion, that's different. Okay? We don't want terror. We don't want fear. We don't want overwhelm so the client can't be with the experience. We don't want any of that. That's why you go slow. That's why you bite size it. That's why you go with the client, what they can do. Right? That's why you don't give them a protocol 1, 2, 3. You really follow what they can do. They're going like, wow, this feels, I'm getting confused, feels like a lot. Okay, let's dial it back down. Let's make it even smaller. So smaller, dialing back, more control. Remember, trauma is also one definition is person's out of control or feels out of control. So dialing it back down, making it more doable. Oh my God, time's running out. I'm just getting into it. So you always want to stay with a range that's doable. And then with movement, when clients have joy coming in or like, oh, that feels good, or now I'm getting this kind of feeling, that's often when things begin to process through, or they go like, wow, there's so much sadness coming through. Those were all experiences that were perhaps buried, right? And the movement is beginning to initiate the client through it. So movement is such a beautiful tool to in and through. And and again, it needs to be used with a trauma-informed lens, right? So we're not cheerleading and going like, come on, you can do this. We're not doing that. We're always calibrating. What's that movement like for you? Can you do a little bit more, right? And it feels like there's an impulse that wants to happen. Okay, so I want to end with one tiny little movement, and then I'll open it up for question. This is a movement that I often teach, and it's a really beautiful tool for people that don't want to move. And with freeze clients, you often have like, I don't want to do movement. So, okay, forget movement. Can I invite you into the imagery? And of course, I'm inviting them into movement, but I'm not telling them that. Right? So I'd like to invite you into an imagery. I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment. And I'd like you to imagine that you're standing in a shower. And it's a beautiful, gorgeous shower with these beautiful glass doors all around, glass windows, glass doors around you. And the water temperature is just perfect. And the water is running over your body and melting the body. And the glass is fogging up because it's warm and cozy in that shower. And you feel kind of playful. So you step closer to the glass. And very gingerly, the tip of your nose is touching the glass. And you're making a tiny little circle because you feel playful. You make a tiny little circle at that glass. And then you're painting the little circle the other way. And because you're feeling really playful, now you're doing a little figure eight. So the tip of your nose is like a tiny little brush, a paintbrush. And so as you're playing with these figure eights with the tip of your nose and these little circles, you can slow them down, you can play with them. Notice where the movement is happening. Where do you notice the movement? And what happens to your breath? And then make it so small, even smaller. And then pause and again, harvest your inner experience. Notice what's happening. Are there emotions inside right now? Do you feel more fluid? Are there some pathways that are opening up? And what's the sequence of that? And just for comparison, you're probably all going to say you found some movement in the back of your neck, right? Back of your head, yes? If I would told you, move your neck, the back of your neck, underneath your atlas, underneath your skull, do that for now. Notice what kind of movement that is. You see how stiff that is? Less fluidity, yes? Okay. All right, so what did you notice? Put it in the chat. Felt groovy. Uh-huh, yeah. By the way, a really good one on long airplane rides. Relaxation from the neck, kind of floating. Yes, moving your eyes. The spiral return. You can now think spirals. More control of the breath. Yeah, mindfulness of movement. You didn't like the imagery. You were resisting it. That's okay. You wanted bigger movements, joyful, playful. Oh, some pain. Okay, make it even smaller. EMJ, yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, people have reported that, rocking and soothing. Nice. Awesome. Okay. So what I was just teaching you is actually continuum. That is working with very, very subtle intrinsic movements. And again, a beautiful tool for working with freeze responses. So here's a client that's in a freeze response that don't want to move, right? And you can give them something like that, where you introduce them to very intrinsic movements inside their body. Yeah, this was a tiny little motion that you basically felt in the base of your neck. It started to open up. What if we would have done this longer, you would have had a rush feeling in the skull, because this begins to initiate the cranial sacral movements. It's basically, you can save the trip to a cranial sacral therapist after this, save $150. And it's basically initiating cranial sacral movements. And it's usually a very fluid, relaxing, flowy kind of motion. So here we have fluidity in 5 minutes in the body that's frozen before. It's incredibly powerful. So again, this is a basic motif of humans, of life. Yeah, movement is a basic motif of human life. And when you bring spirals or pulsations or these little micro movements, and there's many more, but what we're doing is we're reconnecting the client with the vocabulary that they already have and that trauma has interrupted or has suppressed because of the trauma immobility response. And when you're beginning to bring those very subtle pathways in, the person begins to find a pathway through the body. And that's what the power of these kind of movements are. So I'll talk a couple of, see if I can answer a question here. Oh yes, my favorite. I'm notoriously cheat at meditation retreats. I sit there and do micro movements all the time. You know, and I've talked to some very advanced meditation masters, and I said, because I'm a meditation practitioner for a long time, and I said, you know, when I'm in deep meditation, I'm actually touching the natural state. I find it to be movement. And a lot of them agreed with me. I'm not talking this kind of movement off the cushion. I'm talking that inside there's so much movement. And, you know, in my view, there is no such thing as stillness. In my world, stillness is another movement. I know, Ayami, you love that. Oyami is a dancer and a mover. So stillness is what we mean by that is really a kind of a movement that stills, but there's still movement. Think of a lake, right? That's very still. There's still motion. There's still pulsation of life happening. So that's how we are. So yes, and this can be used with a freezing response very much. With the spiral exercise, do you do it at the same time with the client? Can it be done with children? Or children love this, you know? Children love that. Usually what I have found when I bring movements that are natural motions, I often say that I'm teaching people how to remember who they are. And so often starting with movements from nature, and especially with kids in a playful way, you know, move like that gnarly little tree. What would that be like, right? All you do is couple that with imagery, and there it is, because we know it. It's a great way to do this. After movement starts releasing those unwanted, scary, uncomfortable feelings, how do you help guide the client through that safely without them lost, scared, re-traumatized, to bring them out of the feelings? So feelings are not a problem. We want to touch those scary feelings, but we want to touch them with new information and with safety and with resources. So unwanted just means the client doesn't know how to be with it. Yeah. So my job as a therapist is to teach them in a safe way how to be with those feelings, with the holding container in therapy, with showing them a pathway through. I had many clients with movement and they start crying, you know, and they start shaking. And I said, keep going. I'm right here with you. Trust the body, trust your movement. And they're crying and they're moving, they're going, and suddenly they're like, ah, they're breathing and a whole nother life into their body, and a whole new experience opens up. Yeah. So if we're always cushioning the uncomfortable feelings, we'll never move through them. It's a misunderstanding in trauma work. Okay. We have to have clients go into these feelings, but it's all a matter of when and how. So safety, resourcing, the relational container, all that is important. Yeah. So never pushing clients. Movements need to be having insight. Insight often arises after movement. So often when the client is moving, there might not be insight right away. There was a question about insight. But it often arises, and often arises when you pause the movement and you just harvest and just be in this kind of receiving open attention. That's often when information and connections are made. So way I work with clients is I introduce movement or track movement in the client, and we work with it, then we pause, we harvest, and we put another layer in. So that's also how the human psyche works, right? It's how our dream imagery works. We kind of get a little piece and another little piece. So I work in these kind of layers. So thank you. I got a lot in there today. I hope this was helpful. I hope that you got some new tools to take away. And I know you're in for more treats today.